This is the portfolio rubric guidance for standard PK.RL.KID.3. In this standard, students are able to orally identify characters, setting, and events from a familiar story. This is coming from a narrative text, and they are able to use prompting and support. For this standard, the teacher is assessing the student's ability to identify characters, setting, and events from the narrative text that is familiar to them. This should be a familiar text that you have read in class over and over again. In many cases, teachers are using the narrative text from their curriculum. This is a text that you have read to your students for several days. You have done many activities with this text, such as story webs. You have done read alouds, shared reading, group reading. So this is the type of text you should use. When assessing this standard, you are going to ask questions. You're going to ask the student questions that will give them the opportunity to tell you if they know the character, the setting, and the events after you have read this familiar text. An event is anything that happened in this story. So keep that in mind as you are asking your questions. You will see here in the rubric, we have a suggested task with the type of questions you could ask your students. These questions are not required, but they are suggested if you need help with how to ask questions that will lead students to identify characters, setting, and events. If the student is able to do all three, characters, setting, and events, then you can move into assessing the kindergarten standard. You can use the same text that you used when you assessed at the pre-K level. You will just be adding the question about major events. You are looking to see if the student can not only tell you what happened, but they can tell you the important things that happened at the beginning, at the middle, or at the end of the story. So when you are looking at assessing this standard, keep in mind that you will need to upload the questions that you ask the student as well as the answers to these questions in order for the person who is scoring the student work to know what the questions you asked were as well as the answers that the student should have said. When students are taking this assessment, they should be answering your questions orally. This is an oral assessment. You will see in the standard it says with prompting and support, orally identify. So this must be a video recording. Also notice it says with prompting and support. When students are answering your questions, they may have the book in front of them to look at to find the answers to your questions. They can also use the things that you have used in class. Maybe you have some story webs or charts on the wall, or maybe you have some handouts. They can use all of these things that you have used in class to teach this text. The questions that you ask are not prompting and support. That is part of the task. When uploading your evidence, be sure to upload both the video recording of you asking the questions and the students' responses, as well as an answer key to the questions that you have asked. Again, this is a verbal assessment, so the video is required. This is also an assessment where we need an answer key, so the answer key is also required. This is not a writing standard, so student writing will not be scored for this standard. This standard should also be assessed to your students independently. Once you have your student work, then you will want to look at the rubric to score the student work. You will notice in the rubric that it says at level 0, in order for you to score your work at a level 0, when you have given the student their prompting and support, they still cannot identify any aspect of that task, of that text. They are completely off topic. That would score a level 0. If the student is able to recall some of the details from that text, but they can't tell you a character, the setting, or an event that happened, that is a score of a level 1. In order for them to be correct, in identifying a character, they must say that character's name if the character has a name in the text. If the student is able to orally tell you at least one character or a setting or an event, then that would score a level 2. If the student is able to identify two things, either the character and the setting, the character and an event, the setting in an event, if they can identify two of those things, then that is the score of a level 3. In order to score at level 4, the student identifies a character, the setting, and at least one event that happened in the text. At level 5, the student can identify the character, the setting, and more than one event. So they tell you more than one thing that happened in that text. That is the difference between level 4 and level 5. If the student has mastered at level 5, where they can identify the character and the setting and more than one event, then you can ask them questions about what happened at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end. If the student is able to still identify the character, the setting, and an event, but this now must be a major event that either happened at the beginning, the middle, or the end, that would score a level 6. If the student is able to not only identify the character, but they can identify more than one character, and they also can identify more than one character at level 6. At level 7, if they can identify more than one character, the setting, and now they can identify at least two major events, something that happened either at the beginning, the middle, or the end, then that scores a level 7.